All right. Wow. All right, folks. I really appreciate the opportunity to get to talk about the topic because I'm pretty passionate about it. But in the format of our 2020 what I'm going to do is try to keep this presentation to a strict 20 minutes. And then what I really want us to do is get a facilitated conversation. To that end, in the meeting chat, I threw in an open-ended Google Doc. I try to do any facilitated conversation I do is some version like this that allows you, it encourages you all to contribute and participate. Because from my mind, any presentation done by just one person is lacking the potential collaboration and ideas of everybody else. So I'd encourage you find the doc. If you can access Google Docs, go in there and write notes, questions, ideas as we cover through the content. And I will go when we move to the facilitated part of the conversation and be your curator note taker. So as you all are discussing, if I can, I'll try my best to summarize and get some ideas. Because I've always felt like if presenters or facilitators did some more of the also note taking and curating, it kind of takes you out of that, I am sitting at the front of the stage, here, listen to me. But hey, here, let me take some notes from you and try to condense your ideas. It also helps me understand your ideas or your contributions better. So, I'm going to talk about power skills. And before I go any further with that, though, in the meeting chat, here's what I'm going to ask from you. And it's not I don't think it's a heavy lift. I want to know, I don't know how many people in the group, 14 of you, 13 of you. I'd love to get 13 numbers in there for these two questions. So we'll start with question one, like your understanding of what power skills are. I got some threes. I got some fours. Okay. All right. I got some ones new to, like I've always wondered. Some threes. Okay. I love
Simon.
that. Yeah. I could be surprised still, but yeah, I'm pretty confident in that. That's okay and that's legit. Um, so since that's the case, and since like we range in here, one of the things I definitely want to say is for the folks who are like ones and twos or feel like, hey, I'm a little less familiar with the former, the people who do have more and go, I've been doing this or this is my kind of focus, feel free as I go through it to add conversation or content to the chat as we talk through some of these ideas. Now, I love that point that David's making that really these power skills are kind of flexing, and that's actually one of the things I want to address. So, if that's the case, then the other thing I'd love in the group chat as I move forward is really, if you wouldn't mind, what do you think?
Uh,
I pause the type. What do you think is the most powerful power skill? So I just love to see that in the chat as well. But what I'm going to do in a super short window is talk a little about the history and overview. And specifically, I really want to talk about power skills in the context of AI, because I think that's one of the things that has actually spiked interest in this. And there's some really great research to this. That's awesome. I love the Power BI reference. Um, Really what we're going to talk about is a little of the history, and I really hope maybe one or two things you didn't know about the history of power skills, because I think it's really interesting that the original term soft skills came from the military. So we'll hit some of those pieces as we move forward. But then we're going to talk about framing, and we're going to talk about the idea of listening and insight, and a couple of tools that I've found pretty useful. Some of you may know them, and if you don't, there are similar frameworks that you can use and leverage. And then we'll talk about the idea of practice and a little bit about that. And then we'll jump into open discussion for that other 20 minutes. So this should go pretty quickly and should move through pretty fast. I do want to kind of give a little bit of context to people who maybe don't know me or aren't familiar. Um, Power skills, speaking and interpersonal communication is kind of my jam. The funniest thing about this is I spent 2 degrees on, undergrad and master's, and part of a doctoral work on communication, both interpersonal and public communication. So I've been focusing on this for a bit of a while. Um, I've also been working in a career that involves both the presentation aspects of power skills and the facilitation aspects of power skills for, I'm embarrassed to say, 30 years. I'd love to try to convince you all that that's because I started my professional career at like 9, but that sadly wasn't the case. So I've been doing this for a while, but the other part that I think is kind of oddly interesting and more interesting as time goes on is honest confession, one of the things I'm discovering is as more things kind of as we all go into that world where people start investigating things like neurodiversity and stuff, it seems to be number one, more frequently identified with me all the time that I may have missed some of those early areas for being assessed for neurodiversity pieces, and I may fit in there very well. But one of the reasons I wound up making a 30-year career of potentially presenting, speaking, facilitating, teaching, training is specifically because of the neurodiversity that makes me kind of slide towards the not as comfortable or more introvert, very, very far idea side. So this is a skill set that isn't necessarily one that is natural to me, but one that I've practiced to a point where oddly a lot of people mistake that it's natural to me. So I think practice is a key point to get with this, and one of the things we'll be talking about. So let's talk history. I love this idea that soft skills originated from the US military. Part of that is because what they were trying to do, their engineering training course design, recognized that they had, in the 60s, they had a level of knowledge and expertise, but a lack of ability to communicate that expertise to the people that they were dealing with. And they couldn't come up with a way to give the appropriate terminology and or give the appropriate way to measure that skill set. So they called them soft skills. So that original terminology of soft skills was actually a military derivative. And that context of having little or no interaction with machines or engineering was those kind of squishy skills that we were talking about. Now, the move to the term power skills is often attributed to Udemy, but there are some great publications. And in the notes that I sent, the shared Google Doc, I've got many of those resources and some of these kinds of articles that these things came from that talk about where did power skills come from. Organizations like Forbes started recognizing that trend in the early 2020s of the move and need for power skills. And that's where this concept of power skills has kind of become a huge factor in interest to us. Now, this becomes, I think, even more important as we have revolutionized the world with AI, which really has been a growth of about 2 years. Lisa and I were talking just before we got onto our recording about this. I did a presentation on power skills almost a year ago. And I mean, I've been talking about it for most of my career, but in the context of interpersonal and public communication. But when I talked about it a year ago, and if you all kind of roll back about a year ago, generative AI was a brand new thing. It was the hottest thing ever, and it was going to, we're a year into that now, and the changes are massive, as we anticipated they would be. But I think now power skills matter even more. Now, there's a lot of research that suggests or supports this, and I think this is fascinating. In particular, there's an MIT Sloan management study that suggests that teams that are relying more and more heavily on AI tools, they're showing lower levels of empathy and lower levels of psychological safety because they're maybe having less connectedness and less connection. So therefore, less of those things we attribute to power skills. There's also a McKinsey study, and I haven't posted that on the Share Doc, but I will, that talks to that idea that though AI reduces friction in tasks, the new drive, and the McKinsey study references CEOs and leadership. We actually have a context within my own company where we're pushing upskilling, but specifically the upskilling of those skill sets associated with power skills. And the McKinsey study talks a lot about that. So, in the age of AI, as we have things managing more tasks and more task-driven work, that emotional intelligence, active listening, and presence becomes even more critical. So, to that end, I wanted to kind of get to one of the core elements of that skill set, and kind of talk specifically to, from my perspective, one of the pieces, regardless of the power skill we're talking about, whether it's presentation skills or thinking nonverbals or verbal or those pieces, or facilitation skills or listening skills or all of those, or emotional intelligence, any of those kinds of skills that we think of as soft or squishy, one of the key aspects to really improving them is this context of framing. And in particular, when we talk about framing from a listening perspective, that's what I wanted to kind of address. When we apply power skills, there's a mental framework that we work on. And that mental framework is crucial to being able to make the most of the power skills that we're leveraging. Now, one of the things that I recently have been finding is a framework, if you would, for framing that's kind of changed my outlook on things. I often would go into situations and think if I'm presenting, then I'm setting a frame for one manner. But if I'm actively facilitating, trying to draw your feedback in, I literally send my internal framing for another perspective. I often would tell or coach other people who are facilitating, I want to imagine or channel my inner Sherlock Holmes or my inner psych for the people who watch that show. I want to be the person before I walk into a facilitative environment that draws out the things that no one else notices. And when I set my brain to that framing, then I'm able to go into that conversation with some of those power skills kind of tuned up. But there's also situational framing and relational framing. And those pieces are knowing a little bit about the circumstance and the audience that you're speaking with, and the context in which you're speaking with them. And that aspect of framing before we address any of the other power skills becomes critical. And that I feel like is sometimes one of those power skills that's maybe missed, um, or maybe not thought of as a thing you have to actively practice. So, um, framing being one of the things to consider that's maybe not on everybody's radar when we think about power skills. But the other one that several of you brought this up in the chat, and I really loved and appreciated that, was this idea of listening being one of the primary power skills that many of you addressed. In today's world, the listening aspect is probably one of the most important, most identified components. In the note sheet that I included, there's a few really, really, really great books that are out there. Their Audible versions are really awesome. But to help us listen, there are some tool sets that we have that I just thought I'd share and see if anyone was familiar with them. Ah, perfect. And to that point, I'd love for any of you that are online or on the chat, anyone want to tell me what ALLO stands for? Or put in the chat if you would. I'm just looking for takers. There we go. Thank you, ma'am. Yeah. Um, I love that, Adrian. Yeah. So Allo is, and the interesting thing to me about listening is a lot of these tools like Allo or Rasa. Rasa is in there. I sometimes forget the Rasa acronym, but it's something and then accept and then speak and then advise. I can't remember, but the Allo component to me has always been really powerful. That idea of ask, listen, observe, and empathize. So it's a reminder, and that's a lot of times what we need along the lines of framing when getting into facilitative conversations. Having something like Allo, and I literally keep this on a sheet behind this camera, on a sticky pad when I'm doing conversations in which I'm facilitating, to remind me to ask, listen, observe, and empathize. And often when I'm note taking, I'll take it under those categories. Here's my ask, but as I'm listening, what things am I picking up or observing? And I'll write those notes as observations. In terms of empathizing, I think a lot of people think that that's more a heavy psychology tool, or that we need to be laying on the couch to do that or something. But when we look to the um, when we looked at the empathize component, we're not talking about that kind of empathize. We're talking about making the effort to understand the context. So that's that framing piece we were talking about. When we empathize in that way, we're not looking at going, I feel like you're saying, or I understand how you're feeling. More, we're looking at empathizing from let me understand that person's context to get a better job at listening. So tools along these lines are just helpers to remind us of the skill set that we're kind of dealing with and to be a little more tuned to observation. Now, I've only got a couple more minutes, but that's good because I've only got a couple more things to say to these. The tools are in that notebook, and I think that those are great ones out there. And yeah, I really appreciate Lisa. Thank you so much for the quick search and putting out Rasa. I think I have it in the notes, but I'm not sure. So the other tools out there that I did want to mention are tools like the Insight Resume or Notes templates. When I'm going in to facilitate conversations, oh, Gwen is Lisa's personalized, tailored AI. So that's awesome. So thank you, Gwen. But when we look at tools like Insight Resumes or Notes templates, those are much like the facilitation template I just gave you. You can build templates that work for you when facilitating so that when you take notes, they tune towards those pieces that you really know you're driving for, and kind of encourage you to take the notes that often we don't, or when we're looking at a blank sheet of paper, we don't know where to start. So thinking a little bit ahead to prepare those might be good things. This one is just one last piece before I talk practice, and then we wrap into discussion. This one I think is one of the power skills that a lot of people don't necessarily give, or they do give credit to, but actually takes a lot more of the practice than we think. I have conscious effort, less conscious effort, and almost unconscious. I would love for all of you, if you want to, I don't know if you can edit on the slide, but I'd love for you to tell me on a scale, and you can write the scale in the chat or just open the mic to tell me, where do you think the spoken word fits on this chain of conscious effort or almost conscious or less conscious? Where is the spoken word? Top left or bottom right?
Okay, that's an interesting question.
Well, I'm going to ask two then. Where, let me throw that one in. There's the conscious word, and where does that fit? And how about nonverbals? Where do they fit on the conscious versus almost unconscious?
I mean, to me, nonverbals are almost unconscious in every conversation I have with the husband. Constant, you guys, I love him so much. That's why I joke. Conscious effort would be writing an email, and the middle would be having a conversation like this, where I didn't really know what I was going to say, but I wanted to answer the question for you.
Okay. So, as many of you have answered these a lot of you said the nonverbals are probably more, but and I love that I'll misspell this because I'm that guy. Um, This one I find very interesting, and it teaches you a little about nonverbals. I'm going to stop typing, but you get it. So if you think of the spoken word, it takes effort for cognition to think about those. So they tend to be more conscious. So the spoken words are things we have to process. Now, granted, sometimes we're less conscious about them, and when you're public speaking, of course, you're thinking about them a little more, so they become more conscious. But what's so interesting and fascinating to note with me is that if we look at this as a scale, and we look at the unconscious being more nonverbal because they happen whether you realize them or not, and we look at the conscious as a spoken word being more conscious because you're using it, the spoken word is less believable, and the unconscious, the nonverbals are more believable. So what happens is when we realize that our nonverbals are things that we do without even practicing them. And we realize that we're communicating more with the nonverbals because people are reacting to them and being more, they're going, I believe these over the words that you're issuing. When you realize that and that differentiation between the conscious or spoken word and the unconscious nonverbal behaviors that drive things, then we get the idea that maybe practice is a good thing. And practice in the nonverbal world, it really is a huge thing to think through because back to that very first slide when we talked about hard skills are soft and soft skills are hard. Soft skills are a practice. Power skills are something that you don't get better at simply by taking a test and passing it. I wrote several articles about this over the past couple of years, but if we look at Olympians or performance athletes, they don't study and pass their test and get their certification and huzzah, they're an Olympian. They practice it to a degree that is ongoing and continual to become the master of that thing. Power skills need to be approached as a practice. They are always tuned, always improved, always changed, changed with environments. And yes, exactly as John's saying, they require experiential learning. That's not something I can study and take an ABC test on and be done. So they need constant critiquing, reviewing, and improvement. As I sit and look at my slides and realize I forgot a end parenthesis, sorry. Um, but the goal to that piece is when we approach power skills from a we always must be practicing, then we have a different take on it. And that I think opens us to those core areas for discussion that I put on our sheets. And look at that, I went 4 minutes long and I apologize, but I hope that some of these were things that were newer. But I'm sharing this sheet out so that you can see, in this case, I said for discussion, this is a template I use for facilitation. So some of these are things that you can leverage, like, virtual ground rules if we're doing this. So you use your webcam engagement. This was the agenda. These are just some notes for your sake. And as you get ideas, I'd love for you to write them down in here. It looks like some people have. But uh sorry about that. Um the questions I wanted to kind of throw out, and I'd love for you to jump in here, and I want to throw this one out first to get people talking. If there was just one power skill that you could work to improve, which one is it for you? And which one makes the biggest difference in the current world in AI and those changes? And what things would you do to work on it?
Okay, I'll talk again because I hate dead silence for any instructor. Um, so for me, it's always listening. Just and that's partially because that is the power skill that I have improved the most on since I started in the workplace. And not just listening, but listening, assimilating, understanding who the person is. Because people can say the exact same things, but if you understand what their motivators are, then what they're really saying could be two very different things, even if they're using the same words. So for me, and that gave me an interesting idea of, I wonder how Gen AI could help process some of that information.
I love that. And it's funny, to that point, I just learned about a couple of new Gen AI tools that actually are leveraging um they and I this made me want to go, oh my, every time I think, well, we still have this and AI won't take that. There are now some AI coaching tools that will act as another person. So you have a conversation with it and it coaches your ability to manage conversations. And I want to say it's Tenor, but I'll go look it up. And these are great when we have these conversations, as I mention these. If any of you are looking it up, feel free to throw it down in here. Um, and I was gonna do exactly what Stacy had done when she mentioned empathy being that idea, the connecting and feeling and roots. But I loved also Stacy's comment in the chat that empathy also can, like over empathy, can also cause challenges or risks. Um, and I kind of associate with that because getting too deeply connected can be tricky. So what else? What do you all think? What are the ones that you think are the big power skills that are the biggest ones that we're going to need today?
To me, the
It's
one that I always struggle with is just like understanding how someone feels. Like the interactions that you have with someone is easy. They're like I have no problem listening to people and hearing the words that they're saying and maybe even like inferring some meaning into them. But if I have a conversation with someone, it is totally likely that they will that I will get a sense for how they're feeling, but it doesn't actually connect all the way to like how they would say that they're feeling. Or maybe there's like some underlying feeling that's driving their behavior, That's the kind of thing that like. I don't overthink this stuff. If you tell me you're feeling this way, I know you're feeling that way, and I trust you. I trust you that you know yourself well enough to tell me that. But it's the guesswork of emotions. It's the guesswork of understanding people that I struggle with the most.
I like that. And that aspect of we may both feel happy, but what makes the underlying context for your happy is very different than mine. Or the same thing with sad, angry, or mistrustful. There might be other pieces going on there. I love that.
John, did you have something you wanted to throw in?
Yeah, I just wonder if we are if the if our social skills are declining, especially as we get younger and younger. I'm not at all convinced that social networking builds social skills, and so going to be really tough to do, power skills without social skills. Uh,
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have to adapt, right? The power skills in meat space is very different than power skills in digital space. We're
right.
adapting to the new space where we are.
I'm sorry, I'm writing this down because this is great, and I
Meat
can't
space
not.
is hilarious. I
Right?
was
But you're
actually
right. Go ahead. I'm
I was
sorry.
just gonna say with John, I kind of agree with you in the interweb space because I've seen it a lot this past week. A little bit of context, one of my favorite bands has just recently started, like they released an album, they're going out on tour, but there's been some drama around one of the guys, and the people have absolutely been like, there's no social skills. They're literally just absolutely feral about some of the things that they're saying and doing in these public spaces about this one particular band member, completely forgetting that this person is human. It's like they don't understand that there's humanity behind each and every one of these people.
Yeah.
It's the band Ghost, by the way.
Well,
Sorry.
I was
so
about to bring that up.
I was thinking about what I mean in relation to what you said, right, Stacey? I think it's not so much that they're missing social skills. I think because one thing that I wanted to mention is the emotional intelligence. But then the part not of understanding the other side, it is, do I understand how I am positioning myself in the community or with the people that I work with? So how do people see me in what I do? And I think that's again, relating to what you said on social media, I think people, because there is no visual, there's no direct response, they miss the intelligence to understand what the other side response is, how they see that reaction to whatever is happening. But I think for me, emotional intelligence is for me more about, do I position myself in a way that other people see that I'm trying to do the good thing, right? Because I mean, I may think that I'm doing the good thing, and I think I'm listening, and I think I'm communicating well, but is that really true, right? So am I actively figuring out that yeah, what my contribution is here?
I love that. And that idea that there's two different dimensions to it. John, as soon as you said that, I've noticed and then I struggle because being a person of a certain age, I don't want to be the guy making judgments on younger generations, but yet I wonder to what degree, like how much of that is my own personal bias from the age that I'm at and the age that I grew up through,
Yeah.
versus it is a reality of the situation. I have two daughters who will, admit that they're less social in the world than we were because they didn't, it wasn't roll out and stay out until the streetlights came on in their world. But that aspect of the digital presentation and that makes me go, are there such things as digital soft skills? I
Yeah.
don't know, but I
Yeah.
love some of the comments on the chat. What do you think um what do you think is the fix for that? Or is there one?
Well, there isn't. It's an adaptation, right?
I
The thing, the interaction starts to exist, and so therefore it's the same thing with texting. It's the same thing with emojis. It's the same thing with how you're sharing a Google Doc for us to Zoom together. Given those different communication techniques, of course, our behavior changes because it is constrained either by, or it's either constrained or unconstrained. The fact that you can create so much communication on the internet is one of the reasons that the mob mentality is that much more powerful because the mob can form that much faster. And if you think about all those algorithms, man, they really they really like when people are responding. And so like the entire design of the internet, it is meant to drive social behaviors in a negative way.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing that people are saying about AI. Are we optimistic or are we pessimistic? And
Right.
I believe that you need to be realistic, kind of in between the two or both. And the same thing exists with internet mob mentality. It can be used for positive, it can be used for negative, and the more accountability and attention that you pay to those things, the better the experience is.
That is an awesome point, and I'm writing and talking at the same time. So, like, but I wanted to point out, Rob, to your comment in the chat, one of the greatest things about the OSA and the reason that this group is here is just that. So, I'd encourage you to reach out to any of us either through the Reddit or Discord channels or through this one to follow up on those pieces, because this is kind of to me where the practice piece comes in, and having that opportunity to practice is a huge thing. Um, oh
John
yeah,
Worthington.
I wonder as well if we're uh, reaching capacity. People only have so much capacity. Everything is moving so fast. You can do so things so quickly and with so many people digitally, but real social interaction takes more time. You can't do it quickly, and that also erodes it. And so I think I think you have to ask the question, how much can people take? Uh,
yeah,
I think we're just over engineering, your cognitive abilities. I know my cognitive abilities are declining, but I mean, come on, there's just we're over capacity, I think, way over.
yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree there at all. I think, and that's one of the interesting things people see with power skills or any of the pieces we talk about. They forget that you can't have them on all the time. And that was actually then that I started realizing that maybe I'm not as, it's more that I'm practiced at this than naturally good at this. When I was doing presentations and speaking and finding how quickly and how badly I got burnt out. My wife, who I think is on this channel, will laugh and agree because I would go to conferences and speak and then we would find a nearby national park to go hide to. And I would pull the Irish fade. I would do the, oh my gosh, it's the big party. Hey, we should talk about, and I would be out the door before people finished raising their glass and toast to meet my wife to go hike or something for the next day and kind of cool down. I think it's both battery and I think you're right. We're reaching that max capacity. Um, that brings me to one last thing I kind of want to throw at people on a discussion topic, which was so the thing that I thought most interesting as I was going back through the content about the military invented the term soft skills in the 60s. And the reason that they called it soft skills was you couldn't measure, you couldn't incent, you couldn't really call it out, you couldn't hire based on. And we're quite a bit past the 60s and we still have that problem. If we want to grow that, how do we do it? Like, how do we hire by power skills? Or how would you incent a company to grow power skills? And how would you know when you got there?
Well, I think now that we're in, if you want to call this an experience economy, that there are more ways, and this is more IT support driven, but there, with decks and with tools that can get into some of the understanding of in a support world, I think there are there are ways to tell the agents that are handling those calls who are getting rated higher skills. And I don't just mean the survey, I mean like the transcripts being read, be higher skills in terms of empathy. And to me, it seems like as AI, other bots, other support, that the technical piece of support is going to be handled more and more by our robot overlords. And what really is going to matter are the power skills. And there's all kinds of like the 360 tool, which is where you have a group of your ecosystem, like personal work, community, and everybody does this rating system for you. And that 360 tells you how close you are to how you see yourself and how other people see you. If I were back as a service desk supervisor, especially if I had some training budget, I would be doing Myers-Briggs, DISC, and 360 for all my hires, and then using that information to train people about how to communicate internally, up, down, and out better.
Interesting.
So,
So
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
So we use Disc. You mentioned Disc. It's my favorite thing I've ever been a part of. If you haven't done it, I cannot recommend anything else more. What it teaches you to do is how to prioritize or how to understand other people's priorities. We use it in our ticketing system, right? So if I'm going to fix a problem for you, we have certain tools and certain questions where we identify who's calling. And I say, okay, you're a D, so I know you care about time. So what I tell you is I'm going to fix this problem right away. If you call and I know you're a C because I can tell, I've figured it out. And by the way, we have tools to do that. I know you're a C, which is conscientious, which means you care about details. I'm going to fix this problem for you, make it exactly right. I'm going to make it perfect for you, which is like, oh, it gets them excited. If they're an S, someone who likes, sensibility and consensus. And one thing that S is really like is easy. Oh, I'm going to fix this for you. It's easy. Don't sweat it. I got this. I'm going to fix it for you, right? If they're an I, right, which is like influential, right, influence, where they understand that they got something that's going to happen. I'm going to fix this for you, and I'm going to make it where it's long-term. It's never going to happen again, right? I'm going to try to fix this where they don't have to think about it. They think that this moment of call is influential over their future. And I'm going to do the same work, whatever. I'm going to fix the printer or reset the password, whatever it is I'm about to do. It's the same thing, but the way I speak about it is different. The other thing and so by the way, we measure that. So it's like we have resolutions, like I resolved it, right? And it's literally a checkbox, like, did I hit the employee's DISC profile, right? Did I use it in the ticket, right? And so it's just another checkbox. Like, yep, I got it. Yep, I was able to identify it, and I said what they would like, right? And one thing that we keep talking about is empathy. Empathy, for whatever reason, seems to always be sad. When we think about empathy, we always take it in a negative context. Why can't empathy be happy? Dude, you're hyped. I'm hyped, right? But we always think if empathy is the first thing we do, is we turn it into, if you're sad, I'm going to be sad. I'm going to understand your sadness, right? And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, the thing where we say, well, they never call IT when things are working, and they never thank us when things work. They only call us when things are bad. And we're like, oh, why is that? It's because we're always in the dumps with them. Like, oh man, well, you're sad. I'm gonna be sad too. Right? If we started to be hyped when they were hyped, they might call us when things worked, guys.
Yeah.
Right? You got to get out of the idea that empathy is a bad thing. And for the aloe thing, I'll add one more thing. I think aloe is missing a letter. I think it should be aloes. I think it's missing S. And so we think about empathy as the end. Like, I've empathized with this person. I understand their feelings. I'm connected, and I get their feelings, right? And we stop there. But there's a missing step. And that step is to match their energy. And I call it synergy. Okay. So not only do I understand where you're coming from, I am now in it with you, right? I feel it with you. And body language, mirroring tone, mirroring all those things. Not just saying, if someone's really sad and I talk to them, and then I say, I understand your sadness. And I really do. I get to the point where I understand the sadness. But I still talk like I'm happy as hell. It doesn't feel like a great connection, right?
Mhm.
And one of the easiest, and it's going to sound crazy, but one of the easiest ways to explain this is think about a romantic relationship when someone's flirting with you. They're trying to listen, they're trying to understand, and all these other things. And imagine if you understood that this person liked you, right? Like someone's flirting with you, you understand they like you, right? And then let's say you engage in some type of romantic situation. If you don't match their energy, it's incredibly awkward, right? Like,
Yeah.
and that's one of the most intimate human connections there is. And so if we look at that, which is a core intimate human connection from primitive times, the energy match, the synergy, which is what's missing, not just the empathy of how this interaction is going to go, right? Not just the listening and the understanding and also, but the actual matching of someone is what makes you vibe and connect and say, yeah, maybe we'll go on a second date or a third date or maybe whatever, right? And it's the same thing with every other relationship. If you can't match the energy, if you can't match the vibe, if you can't match what, it has all these different words for it, synergy, whatever, if you don't match it with the person as you're interacting with them, you're only understanding, then you're missing to me the most important piece. You almost got to the finish line and you didn't get it. And aloe ends at empathy and it needs to go to synergy. It needs to be ALOES because
Hmm.
that's where, and just seriously think about taking aloe through a flirting situation. You're at a bar, I don't know, wherever you go to flirt, and you're doing everything and you empathize with the person, but one person has a significant energy of saying, like, I'm really interested in you. I'd like to take you on dates. I like you. But the other person's body language and energy doesn't match. How would that person feel? Even if they understand, oh, I completely understand you like me. I got it. I empathize. I understand why you like me and what you like about me and what you prioritize in your life. But I'm going to act like cold shoulder. I'm not going to match your energy. Imagine what that would be like. Why can't we simply take that same concept and do it everywhere else? Even if it's just, hey, help me with my printer. Doesn't have to be, romantic, but that's a great example because that's one that we all naturally take all the way to the S. And when we don't take it all the way to the S, we can recognize it immediately because we understand how awkward it feels. But we don't realize that we could take that same exact style of interaction and apply it to help desk, but we should. And I train my guys to do that. So that's it. I'll get off my soapbox.
That was
I
good.
appreciate
That
the
was good.
idea, though. I thought it was really a good point. But I do know on a time front, this is where we pivot to the broader conversation. Is that correct, Lisa?
You got one hand raised still.
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry, Adrian. Oh, and Rob. Oh, Rob's like, wait, no, that was you got a good point. Gotcha, sir.
I
What's up,
think
Adrian?
no, it was an old hand, but it's kind of go back to I my belief is that humanity always ha people are always looking for recognition. They're always looking to be relevant. And for some reason, humanity is always drawn to all the bad stuff, right? I put in the chat too. I mean, there's shows like Rescue 911, there's border security. It's
Mm,
always about what are the bad things that are happening. That draws more attention of people than the good things that happen in people's life, right? That's why reality TV exists.
yeah,
So this whole social media, I think, is just an easy access, an easy platform to make that just bigger, right? It's always been there. It's just an
yeah.
easy way for people to be negative, to be bad, to whatever it is they want to do, and seek that recognition and that relevance. That was
That
my
makes sense.
comment.
Well, and it makes sense both that social amplifies that, but also if you look at our like our evolutionary structure, it makes sense for humans or any species to be more attentive to threats than to advantages. Because it's nice that there's food over there, but that lion might eat me. And if I had to choose which I need to pay more attention to, it's the lion that would eat me, even if I go hungry. So we're evolutionary geared to look towards the dangerous or the bad. And it appeals to us because our bodies and brains have been tuned over gazillions of years to always look for those threats. So those threats draw our eyes a lot more than the opportunities and the fun things. But that means that we have to make the conscious effort to build these things. And that's part of the practice component that I was talking about. It's not simply I'm good at this, or to Simon's point, that it's there and I've done it or I know the four letters. It's the practice of it. And then the constant practice or attention to it that I think is cool. Julia, thank you so much for coming. And yeah, I think I want to pivot to make sure this was supposed to also pivot to open discussion as well. I hope this went well. I really like the notes pieces. I keep those note sheets up for about a week, and I share more pieces to them as I get them. So, Lisa, what else do we pivot on the last 20 to open-end discussion about OSC?